The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseware continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free. To make a donation or to view additional materials from hundreds of MIT courses, visit MIT OpenCourseware at ocw.mit.edu.
Okay, good evening. Everybody nice and warm from the snow? Thank you for coming to Nuts and Bolts of New Ventures Business Plans on a snowy night in Cambridge. My name is Joe Hadzima, and this is the first of 6 evenings we're going to have for the course. The course name is Nuts and Bolts of New Ventures and Business Plans. First of all, it's not really about the business plan itself. Think of it as we're going to talk about how to plan and execute a new venture. And don't think of a business plan as a fixed document in this course. It's a dynamic process we're going through. It may be a document, it may be a few slides, but at the end of the day, what it ends up being is a shared vision between you and your team as to where we are, where we're going, and how we plan to get there. So that's the goal of all of this. And I should also say, because I know some people in the audience are not doing traditional business ventures, we're going to use the business terms a lot, but this could equally apply to social developmental entrepreneurship, to nonprofits, even to governmental ventures. It's a way of thinking about how to organize new ideas and get them going. Now, a little bit about the course. This is the 25th year. It's hard for me to believe it's been 25 years for the course. And the founding of the course has an entrepreneurial lesson in it. So here's the backstory. I was teaching some things here on sort of legal stuff, and some students came up and said, you know, I think we had one entrepreneurship course at Sloan at the time, and they had taken that, and they said it's a great course, but it's not telling us anything practical. So could you do a course during IAP to tell us how to do something practical, how to start a company? So this was back 25 years ago, before the internet, and the IAP courses were in a fixed printed catalog that you would get. Shows you how far we've come. So I said, well, you know, I'll think about doing a course, and let me get back to you. Well, I got tied up with some other things. And then they came to me and said, we put it in the catalog, and we dare you not to show up. Interesting. So I thought about it for a while, and then I thought, well, I should be angry, but, you know, I think I have a customer. I think these people want something. So the first attribute was I had a customer. And all right, I'll play this game for a bit. Problem is I only had 2 weeks to organize it. So that wasn't enough time to really do anything formal. So I said, I think it was 4 nights, and I said, all right, let me pick, we'll do, let's see, 2 hours, 3 hours, we'll do 8 topics, and I'll go and find some people who know about those, and how am I going to make it easy at the last minute to get these people? I said, just come into class, and whatever the field is that you're in, speak maybe 10 minutes on the 5 things I wish somebody had told me about whatever you're talking about before I got started, and then we'll do questions and answers. And I said, I got to make it entertaining, so I called up people and said, you know, do you know somebody who can do this talk? And if you do, you have to have seen the person, you know, talk. They have to be entertaining. You have to vouch for them. And so we did this in a period of 2 weeks, and probably half the speakers that showed up for that first session I had never met before. So I'm thinking, this is going to be a disaster, right? It turned out to be a great success. And I think the lessons for this about in an entrepreneurial way were I had a customer for a product. They wanted something. I was able to clearly define the task because I didn't have time to do anything more. If I'd done it myself, it probably would have taken longer and not been as good. I got great people, and I was able to communicate to them what the task was, and then I got out of their way. And they did a great job. So there's an entrepreneurial lesson in how to start a company. Make sure you have customers, get great people, the whole business planning, new venture type thing is really trying to find what the task is and then to be able to communicate and execute on it. So the course really is an entrepreneurial venture. That's how we started, and later Joost basically figured out how we could get credit for it, and it's just blossomed ever since. So that's the background. In the 25 years, we've seen all sorts of things. We've seen bubbles, the internet bubble. I stood here thinking, I just read in the paper that Hotmail, back in 1997 or so, had started up and been sold in 18 months for $450 million, selling, or basically giving away email. And I'm thinking, how am I going to explain to people this isn't the way it usually works in periods of time? More recently, Instagram. So there are some things that happen at points in time that defy direct logic on it. And if you can catch those waves, that becomes a good thing to do. We've also seen busts after the internet collapsed, after the financial markets collapsed. Actually, that is one of the best times to start a company. And many of the really enduring companies have been started during downtimes. And the reason is resources aren't available. There's financing dries up. You got to be really focused. You have to actually deliver something of value. And there's a lot of history about companies that get started during downtimes. But through all of that, ups and downs, it all boils down to really two basic thoughts, and we're going to touch on it over and over again in the course. And that is, whether it's a business, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a governmental project, it's the first thing you got to do is create value. So if you're not creating value, you can't really do anything. And then having created value, the question is, how do you capture some or all of that value to make what you're doing sustainable? And sustainable in the concept of traditional companies is profit. And in the context of developmental stuff, it can be, we can do it again, rinse and repeat. So when we look at creating value, we're going to be asking questions about who do we create value for? How much do we create? How much value do we create, and how do we create it? And then when we talk about capturing value, the traditional way has been for customers, somebody who will pay you for your goods, the product you do, or your services. And the trick, as we'll see in financial projections and the business model parts that will come in the next few days, is that whole process something where you can make enough money that you can continue it. So traditional capture of value is through customers. There are other ways to capture value in the area of advertising or monetization that we'll talk about also. And you think about things like where third parties provide that payment. So think of the U.S. healthcare system where historically the patient, the person who the value is delivered to, as in you're going to get treated, isn't really paying directly the cost of that. So sometimes figuring out how that works can be the challenging part. Okay. So at the end of the day, we're going to need, to make all this happen, we're going to need people. That's the number one thing you're going to need for a venture. Resources of some sort, either cash or partnerships. Skills, some of them you'll learn in this class, some of them you'll learn on the job. And then that one that's the hardest one to figure out, but if you can get it, it's the best, and that's called luck. I'll always go with some luck. So our goal for the course is basically to make sure you get infected with the entrepreneurial thinking virus. And it really is a virus that can be infectious. The good news is it's not known to be fatal. It's highly contagious. It is a lifelong affliction, so you'll have to get used to it. But at the end of the day, I think you'll really, if you catch it, you'll be in best shape. This is what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to tell you a little bit about who you are. We're going to introduce the teaching team. We'll introduce the case study and business plan basics tonight. And then we'll take a small break. and then we'll get on with Steve Pierce, who's come all the way from Florida today to talk to us. He's thinking maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Okay, so who's in the class? Some of you signed up, well, many of you signed up at the website. We had 160 signed up, and the organizations that you're from are, and I'll just read them alphabetically: Boston University, Broad Institute, Columbia University, the Department of Defense, Harvard College, Harvard Kennedy School, and Harvard Business School, Mass General Hospital, University of Massachusetts, University of Macedonia, University of Michigan, Toronto, Wellesley College, several private companies that I won't say your names to protect you, and of course MIT. Now the areas that you said you were interested in are all over the place. We have consumer devices, foreign language learning, financial technology, social enterprise related to healthcare, educational technology, medical devices. One of the reasons I'm going through this is that we hope that in the period of this course you'll actually form some teams. So if you find some of these topics interesting, or if you're some of these people, then you'll at least shouting you out a bit. We have nuclear energy, for those of you into that, specialty biotech chemicals, a sleep product, oncology drug delivery, biotechnology, 3D printing, eyeglasses in West Africa, independent film industry, lab testing process and equipment, big data, data privacy, B2B information technology, energy technology, aerospace, crowdfunding, and e-commerce. So hopefully you'll find a kindred spirit in those. Now, what about the background of the people? We have some people, this is the first course they've ever taken in entrepreneurship. We've had people who have taken a bunch of other entrepreneurial courses at MIT or at other universities. In fact, we have a couple people who have taken nuts and bolts before. They did pass before, but they're back for more. Several startups, somebody who's always been in government, and somebody who's been, a couple people in 15 plus years in large organizations. And some members of the Venture Mentoring Service are actually in the audience. We have undergraduates, grad students, postdocs, visiting faculty, and staff. So the question is, it's a pretty diverse audience, and we've got a lot to cover. So a little advice to the people that are first-timers, I would say soak it all in, and as you go forward, try to think about the kind of things we talk about when you approach entrepreneurial things for the first time. More experienced people, use this to refine your thinking. I've been in this course for, as I said, 25 years, and every single year I come up with some refinement in my thinking, listening not only to the speakers, but to the questions that come. So I hope you enjoy the course. We do have to calibrate before we get going, though. It is MIT, so we have our first formula, and it is H equals R divided by E. So I've got an audience with a whole bunch of different people, and we're trying to solve this equation, and we're trying to maximize H. So for those of you who can't see, H equals R divided by E. Anybody want to take a guess what these symbols are? Yeah, the snow has got you. All right, I'll give you a hint. H is happiness. Okay, this is where, okay, let's see. Yeah.
Reality or expectation?
Oh, he jumped right to it. Reality over expectations. All right, last year somebody said revenue divided by expenses, which is equally good, I guess. So this is a generalizable formula, and for those of you who have even slight idea of math, if I lower your expectations to 0, I can make you infinitely happy. But I think I'm never going to be able to do that. But the point is, this works both for teaching here and for everything you do. It includes if you over-deliver on what you promise, you'll have people happy. Your investors will be happy, your customers. So happiness is reality divided by expectation, with the fact that you can never quite get expectations to 0. Okay, so lower your expectations. I want you to all be happy as we move through the course. So who are we? We have Joe Hadzima, Yost, Gino, Ronald Cherry, and some highly paid volunteer speakers that I'll introduce. A little bit about my background. Senior lecturer at Sloan, was a partner in a law firm in Boston for many years, was one of the founding judges of what's now the 100K competition, former global chairman of the MIT Enterprise Forum, managing director at Main Street Partners, where we do technology commercialization, and co-founder and president of IP Vision that does intellectual property analysis. I should say this is the first course at MIT that we're aware of that brought both sides of campus together, the engineering, science, architecture side of campus to the Sloan side. You would think they're miles away, and until this class they really weren't together. There have been a lot of companies launched out of this class. Some have gone public, and it's been quite a history over time. Then I'd like to introduce our case study next. This is Virtual Ink. That, if you can't read that logo up there. This is a case you have in the materials. It is a computer peripheral company, and let me see if I can make this work. I'll give you a little bit of an introduction here. Is that appearing up there?
For the times when you don't need a projector and writing on the whiteboard is the best teaching tool, there's the Mimeo Capture Ink recording system. Enabled by Mimeo Studio software, the Mimeo Capture system actually sees and records everything you write on the board in real time and multiple colors. It can even convert handwriting into editable text. The system creates digital files that you can send to your students, so now they can focus on the lesson rather than on taking notes. And you'll save time by using the digital files in other classes. The Mimeo Capture system works with your Mimeo Teach interactive system and comes complete with a magnetic charging tray, 4 rechargeable marker holders, and a digital eraser. The Mimeo Capture system, bringing your whiteboard notes into the 21st century.
Okay, so that is an overview of what Virtual Ink eventually became, and in fact today they have a whole bunch of other products. Jonald, our entrepreneur, who's going to come in at the end, was the founder of it. He's got a very interesting story. The reason we use Virtual Ink, even though it's a little bit dated, it was in the late 1990s, is that it's an easy concept to understand. So we're not getting into all sorts of, although there is some technology behind it to be sure. It was an entrant in what was then the 50K competition. It's an interesting story of the times and the company. And most importantly, it's that Jonald himself comes in and he tells you stuff that you're not going to find. It's so easy to get people into a class like this who are successful. Oh, I came up with this idea at my dorm room, and I did this. We raised some money, went public. Now I'm wealthy. Well, you don't really learn anything from that. You learn if it's lucky and everything works out. But Jonald comes in and he'll tell you a very interesting story of what he went through during the whole period. Now, we'll mention it from time to time during the course. You'll see reference to it in some of the materials as you prepare. The entire plan is in the course reader. Do not assume, however, that it's a model plan. Every year we get people handing in the executive summary, and they follow exactly the Virtual Ink thing. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to think on your own about it. But it's an interesting one. I tried to find another plan to work on, and a lot of people won't give up their original plan, or they never actually had one. So it's a unique situation we have. Now we're going to go into business plan basics. This is an introduction I'm going to give about what's in a business plan, the kind of things you need to think about. And then over the course of the next 5-6 nights, we'll be filling in each of the components of it. So think of this as a high-level overview. And it's going to be a little bit like the MIT fire hose approach. For those of you who aren't MIT students, they say that MIT going to MIT is like trying to drink water from a fire hose. It's just so much coming at you. And we're going to throw a lot at you over this period of time. Some of it's going to stick right away, and some of it you won't get for a while. And the reason I know that is we get emails back constantly saying, oh, I just encountered this situation, and I finally figured out what you were trying to explain to us. So we always want feedback, and as long as people find what we're doing useful, we're going to continue to do the course. Okay, so topics in my overview is why write a plan, what should be in it, and then talk a little bit about the plan as a financing document. So does anyone know who this character is? This is Dwight Eisenhower, Supreme Commander, Allied Forces, Europe. D-Day, became President of the United States. Life magazine. He's on the cover and he says, plans are worthless. So I guess we're sort of done with the course. This is a guy who planned and executed this massive invasion, and if you've read any of the history of it, it's just an amazing operation. So plans are worthless, but planning is everything. So again, these days, we'll talk about business plans and whether to write one specifically. So for example, the Wall Street Journal had a big article about, does a startup really need a business plan? And what they're talking about are written business plans. And there are academic studies showing that people would be better off just to go off and launch a company. And I pretty much agree with that at one level. I've been around the country judging various business plan competitions or classes that have business plans. It's pretty clear that the people doing it have no intention of actually starting a company. It's just an academic exercise. At MIT, that's not what we're doing. We're trying to figure out, and what Yost and the people at the 100K did was say, we're trying to build tomorrow's leading companies. This is about trying to actually get things going. So a business plan, or at least thinking about a business plan, is really what you need to do to launch a company. So why actually write a real plan? Well, you have to, you think, because nobody's going to finance you without something written. You may need it to talk to strategic partners, to explain what you're doing to others, and to attract key people. But the real reason you need to write a plan or think about it is you need to understand your business. What is the scarcest resource that you as an entrepreneur have out there? Money? Well, plenty of money in the world. Time. It's your time. The reason to think it through is you want to spend the next 3 to 5 years or whatever working on something. Is this the best idea you have? For an entrepreneur, it's always, well, I need money. Well, the point is money tends to flow to where opportunity is. So if you can create value and opportunity, you can get money. It's harder in some parts of the country than others. But the real scarce thing is your time. So you really need to understand and think about the process of planning. Famous expression, people don't plan to fail, they just fail to plan. And in the course of this course, we're going to be asking you to think about who are your customers or users? Who cares about what I do? Will they buy or use what you're doing? What will they pay, or how can you otherwise make money or get resources, capture value? How are you going to make and deliver it? Think about something as simple as Netflix as a concept, right? Back when it wasn't streaming, it was DVD in a packet shipped to you. It's not an amazing concept. It's pretty straightforward, but the planning, their key was they could actually deliver on it effectively and efficiently. Or Amazon selling books online. That's how they got started. I mean, what's so hard? Well, there's a lot that goes on in the background. And what are the resources, people, and technology you'll need? And so whether it's a Web 2.0 or a biotech or a social developmental, I want to just reiterate the really two basic things. It's create value and then figure out how to capture or harvest the value. That's the key thing we're trying to do. So how many of you have seen the movie The Social Network? Okay, you may remember this scene. Let's see if this works, if I can do that. So Eduardo says it's time to monetize the site. And Mark says, what does that mean? And Eduardo says, it means it's time for the website to generate revenue. No, I know what that means, but I'm asking you how you want to do it. And he says, advertising. Remember that famous advertising? And Mark's reaction is, no. And he says, Eduardo says, well, we've got 4,000 members. This is Facebook, okay, 4,000 members. And Mark says, because the Facebook is cool. If we start installing pop-ups for Mountain Dew, it's not going to, and Eduardo says, well, I wasn't really thinking about Mountain Dew, but maybe at some point I'm talking about the business and the company, the site. And Mark says, we don't even know what it is yet. We don't know what it is. We don't know what it can be. We don't know what it will be. We know that it's cool. It's a priceless asset. I'm not giving it up. Eduardo says, when will it be finished? And the famous answer is, it won't be finished. That's the point. The way fashion's never finished. So here they are, these guys that have created something that they think of have value, and they're trying to figure out how to harvest the value. So I went and I looked at the 10K for Facebook. 10K is the annual report you file with the Securities and Exchange Commission when you're a public company. And in the first part of it, they say, you know, you have to say what your business is. And they say, our mission is to make the world more open and connected. And so I'm looking to try to figure out what they say their business is after that. And it was very curious. They had three major headings in the 10K. The first one was how we create value for users. The second one was how we create values for developers through the Facebook platform. And the third one was how do we create value for marketers. So here they are, a public company with, billions of users now, and they're focused on how do they create value, and they're still struggling a bit with what their revenue model is on the other side. So the two basic, my point is the same things that you're going to think about starting a company, how do you create value and how do you harvest value, never goes away. It's constant through this. And I thought I could go to the 10K and find some really nice story about how they harvest value, and they're still thinking about how to create value. Now, one way to think about what we're going to do here is to have a visualization. And I think of it as a pyramid. So at the top of the pyramid, you can think of as your mission statement, similar to what Facebook said. And underneath that, supporting that, is your elevator pitch. People know what elevator pitches are? I think we did that in the 100K. It used to be all of the venture capitalists lived in, the offices were high-tech, high buildings. So you'd have maybe, 20 floors. The theory is you get into the elevator, the person turns to you and say, what do you do? And you have 20 floors to explain it in maybe 30 seconds. A lot of the VCs have moved to two-story buildings. The elevators, if they take, so you have to do this as you run up the stairs with them. So you got to be even crisper today than before. Underneath that might be the executive summary. We'll go into that a little bit. Under that might be the PowerPoint presentation. Under that could be the full plan if you get to the point of writing one. But underneath all of that are a set of foundations of individual topics. We'll go through some of these through the course. And the point is, it takes a lot of effort to distill everything down up to the tip of the pyramid. And what you're looking for is you can describe that top very clearly and have it supported all the way down through it. The mission statement might be a sentence or a paragraph. The elevator pitch could be 30 seconds. The executive summary, 2 to 5 pages. PowerPoint, 10, 20, 30. Do you know the 10, 20, 30 rule? I put a link in on the website to the Guy Kawasaki clip about that. So PowerPoint, I totally don't do this in this presentation, but he says 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. That's what you're aiming for. And then the full business plan could be anywhere from 25 to 30 pages if you end up doing that. The slides, by the way, for most of the presentations will be posted on the website afterwards. So that'll help you out. So now the question is, all right, I sort of get it. It's this image that I have to do and figure out. The question is, who actually writes this? Is it the founder alone, the team, or even a professional hired writer, consultant? Charlie Tillett, who will be here on Thursday, and I stood outside this room at an MIT Enterprise Forum event during the break, and I asked Charlie, who had entered the 10K competition back in the day, "What are you doing this summer, Charlie?" He says, "Well, I'm graduating. I'm thinking from Sloan. I'm trying to think what to do." I said, "Well, I'm working with some entrepreneurs. I've been working with them for a couple of years, and they really could use someone to help write a plan. They need to get some funding." And Charlie was game. We hopped in his truck, drove up to a strip mall up in Tewksbury, I think it was, a room with 10 engineers, and he ended up joining the company to write the plan and stayed with them through when they went public. But at the end of the day, it was the entrepreneurs that needed to own the plan. These guys were great engineers, but they couldn't write a plan if you paid them $1 million. They just couldn't articulate it well. So that's one of the reasons we try to put teams together, because if you have a great idea, but you're missing some skills, you got to figure out a way of getting people with skills together. And those entrepreneurs would never have gotten anywhere near where they are today if Charlie hadn't joined them. And Charlie wouldn't have been able to take a company public if he hadn't hooked up with the ideas. So the point is, whoever writes it, the team has to own the plan, by which I mean they really have to be able to defend it. Sometimes the issue is, well, what do they look like? Don't put it in a big binder. It doesn't really matter how you put it together. It should just look somewhat professional, but not overly slick. You're an unknown character. If Bill Gates came up to me and threw a napkin on the table with some ideas on it, he'd have my attention. But if you do the same thing, you're not quite there yet. So it's the first step towards it. You've got to have something that says this is a serious team or person that are going to do some serious things. Now, the thing to remember is the plan is really a selling document at the end of the day. Entrepreneurs, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you better get comfortable with selling, because you're always selling. You're selling customers, you're selling financing people, you're trying to convince them. But by selling, I mean you're trying to convince somebody that what you want them to do is something they should do. Convincing people to do something is quite a skill, and you should get good at it. You really should work at it. It's selling customers, financing sources, partners, recruiting people. So you're always selling as an entrepreneur at some level. You may not be the best, but you should really practice that. So this plan is the first part. It's a selling document. And whatever it is, it's not a hype document at the end of the day. It's got to be defensible. The elements of a full plan, these are the topic areas. Whether or not you put them in a written document or not, you need to start to think about. And during the course, we'll touch on a number of these. There's executive summary and a traditional plan, something that says what's the opportunity you're looking at, what's the market you're going after, what are the economics of the business. All of these things will go into a little more detail. For the technologists in the audience, note that there's no particular section here that says technology. And the reason is people, by and large, don't buy technology. Technology is something we use to accomplish things. And so the plan really isn't fundamentally about the technology. It's what the technology enables. And when Bob Jones comes in tomorrow, he'll talk a little bit more about that from a what people actually buy viewpoint. Now, a little bit more into the nuts and bolts here. A cover page. You should have one in a plan. It should have some information that you could figure out who this plan is, how to reach people, confidentiality legend, and the securities law legend. We're going to cover that in detail on the night we do the legal stuff. Here is the Virtual Ink cover page as an example. They got some contact info there. It always frustrated me when I actually got a written plan. If I liked it, often I wouldn't be able to figure out how to contact the people. So put the address on it. And they put a little confidentiality legend on it. It looks something like that initially. And as we'll see on the night when we do the legal stuff, when the lawyers get a hold of this, the legend changes a little bit. So I'm not saying don't get the lawyers early on, but realize that you got to manage them a little bit. But we'll go into that in more detail. Now, if you actually have a written document, it should have a table of contents so people can figure out what's in it. And it should have page numbers and all of that sort of thing. So my question to you is, what do you think people read first in a business plan? What's the first thing you would read if someone gave you a plan? Yeah. Executive summary, because that's, as you'll see here, that's sort of explain what's going on. What's the second thing people look at? Probably most important, beyond when they figure out what the heck this is about. It's the people. Who are these people? So if you've got an actual document and they're trying to figure it out, they're going to get a little frustrated if they can't figure out where the information is. So not to overdo it, but have a table of contents. So if the first thing they read is an executive summary, what is it really? Well, it's the first thing investors read, as I said. Think of it as a resume for your full plan, right? So the goal is to get the interview. When you have a resume, it goes out there. You want to get the interview so you can explain yourself and hopefully get the job. In the case of a business plan, the executive summary or the elevator pitch is really to get a chance to explain more fully what it is you're doing. And then when they look at the executive summary, I like to think about what investors are looking for. And they're the 3 W's. The first one is, why this? Why is what these people are proposing to do, why is it something I should be interested in? Why are they interested in it? Is it a big problem? I mean, it could be a big market opportunity or a big problem in the world. Amy Smith, who was a MacArthur fellow, teaches over at the Edgerton Center, was in the 100K. And I remember quite distinctly when she got up to give her pitch at the judging competition, she said something that went like this. She said, 1.9 billion people in the world don't have access to clean water. Whoa, I didn't know that. In order to test whether water is clean, the traditional way of doing it is to incubate the water to see if anything bad is growing in it. She said it a little more articulately than I did. And she said, all the existing incubators are powered by electricity. If you look where the 1.9 billion people without clean water live, and you look where the electricity is, they're not in the same place. Our invention is a way to test water without using electricity. Let me explain how you did it. So from an initial viewpoint, wow, this is a big problem. So why this? A big problem. So that's the first thing. Why is what you're proposing something important? Why are you spending your time on it? The second is, why now? Why is now the right time to do it? I've been on the sort of bleeding edge of technology for many years. I had somebody come up to me at an investment conference last year and he said, you're at MIT? Yeah. I said, well, tell me about this new 3D printing thing. It's really hot. I said, that's been around for 20 plus years. Right? I mean, it's just now it's getting interesting for a variety of reasons, but I can show you, 20 years ago. So sometimes it's right now is the right time. And I'll give you some examples down the road. The third is, why this team? All right, big problem, something important. There's a good reason why it's now. Why are these people the right people to do it? Those are the things people are really trying to glean when they read your plan or hear your pitch. To which I asked, if they get the first three, there's a fourth one they get, which is, you want to guess what the fourth one is? Why won't this work? So if that, in a selling process, when the potential customer pushes back and is starting to ask questions about why, well, will it work for this or work for that, you've sort of got them hooked. And Steve will probably talk to you how to set the hook a little bit later tonight. So the three whys: why this, why now, why this team? That's what should come out. And the why won't this work is part of the task is to figure out how to lead people to the right conclusion on that. And I'll talk about it in a little moment on that. So the executive summary, 2 to 5 pages max. It's got to be clear. It's like a resume. And the object is, at the end of the day, someone can really articulate what you're going to do. The elevator speech is to the executive summary. The elevator speech might get you an invite to submit an executive summary, which might give you an invite to do the whole plan or a pitch. It's going to try in 2 to 5 pages to say who you are, what are you doing, what is the market, how many dollars you need, what resources, what is your sustainable advantage if you do this, why are you going to succeed. You've got to pull all of that together in a very short period of time. It's a difficult document to write. And you may end up writing it over and over again because you've got to distill that whole thing down to it. Let me give you an example of 2 executive summaries. And since the font is so small, I'll read it from here. The first one is called Electronic Components. And let me read it to you if you can't see it on the screen. Electronic Components, Inc. is a startup company that will make a variety of electronic components, beginning with a new type of aluminum-based capacitor. The unique product, coupled with an excessive demand for capacitor devices, will provide us with an ample share of the capacitor market and numerous opportunities for expansion into related electronic components. Everybody on board? Okay, this is a real one. Okay. The founders are dedicated and determined to make the venture a successful and profitable entity. Whew, that's good to know. I thought they were just doing this for fun. Technical expertise is provided by James F. Lynch, who has been involved in designing capacitors for 11 years. He obtained a Bachelor of Science in Electronic Engineering from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. That alone is probably going to get him the experience, and the fact he's MIT, will overcome all of the other deficiencies here, which is I don't think most people would understand what it is he's proposing to do. Do you know what they propose to do? I mean, what is excessive demand for capacitors? Why? Why is there excessive demand? How big is the market? So, and if you read the rest of it, which I suggest you do when you get the slides, it reads a bit like a grant proposal. There is a good thing in here. It says that they've actually put their own money in. So the guy's committed. Now, this is an example of something where there's probably, given the nature of the person involved, there's probably a lot of substance underneath, but it's not doing a very good service in trying to convey it. So that's sort of a shame, because there's so many plans you read which don't have any substance behind them, and yet they read a lot better. So we got to figure out how to make things better. Now, the other one, by way of contrast, is People's Express. This was sort of, well, let me read it. The eastern seaboard of the United States is ripe for the entry of a new, super-efficient, low-cost air carrier to provide quick, reliable intercity air transportation. Such an entity would bring to the Northeast the same benefits that have accrued to other areas of the United States. Chief among these are frequent jet commuter service between major cities, prices competitive with private automobiles, fulfillment of the congressional goals, and enacting the Airline Deregulation Act. The new company will be able to achieve these goals for the following reasons: aggressive, innovative management that's been tested in the field, equipment and facilities designed specifically for low-cost production of air transportation, manpower selected, trained, and motivated to be efficient and profit-oriented, read between the lines, non-union probably, and new systems to be applied to the entire business. Now, if you look at those 2 executive summaries, I think most people would think that the People's Express, which was sort of the early version of what we now call JetBlue, is a lot clearer to understand what it is. I mean, it's got, you can pretty much see what they're doing. They're experienced guys. They've thought about how to design it. And you could start having a discussion around this in a lot more detail than you would with the electronic components. So the trick is to end up having an executive summary that looks more like the People Express than one that just wastes a lot of words and doesn't get to what you're supposed to be doing. This is a virtual ink executive summary, which you'll see. Again, it's not exactly the model, but look at it. It was put this way into the 50K at the time. And you decide yourself whether you think it's a good executive summary as part of your assignment. Okay, so let's move into the body of the plan. And when I say the plan, I mean when you're in your planning process also. So the question is, what is the opportunity you're going after, or what is the problem you're trying to solve? How big is it? You know, what's the opportunity now? What's going to happen over time? And why is this the right time for the product or service? This reminds me in the 100K, it's the 50K back in there one year, we had a semifinal awards thing, you know, here are the semifinal teams. And one team came up and said, I guess you guys didn't like our plan. Now, back in those days, we didn't actually know who the people were. That was part of it. They were all no names. We just looked at the ideas. And I said, well, I don't actually know what yours was. And he said, well, we were the guys with the air traffic control system improvement. And it was a fascinating plan. It was, you know, they had figured out how to make it more efficient. And I learned a lot of things about air traffic control systems. And I said, the problem is, you know, none of us could see how that could be a business. I mean, you have to change the entire air traffic control system, it appeared, in the United States. I mean, it looked like a great solution, but, you know, is it a business? And they said, well, didn't you know that the Federal Aeronautics Administration, FAA, has put out a request for proposal for changing the air traffic control system in the United States? No. Why would I know that? You know, they had assumed everyone knew that. That would have changed the whole complexion. That meant at that time, the convergence of a driver for the business was there, and they didn't tell us that, so they didn't get another opportunity. In the healthcare area, for many years, we'd see really interesting technologies that could improve outcomes for patients, and the question was, well, who was going to pay for it? And a couple of years ago, Medicare put in some rules that said that hospitals get penalized if patients get readmitted. That's opened up a huge opportunity for things like home monitoring or other kinds of things that before would be very hard to see how that was going to work. So there are a lot of new companies trying to figure out how they can do things to finally help patients for better outcomes. There wouldn't be a market for that 5 years ago. It would be a long, hard uphill climb. So why is this the right time? As I said, I've been on the bleeding edge of some of this stuff. The body of the plan, it should talk about the market, who's there. We'll go into more detail with Bob about talking about customers. Investors have these different ways sort of thinking of things, and one of the questions that surprised me early on in my career was a VC that said, okay, I get it. You got a great idea, but let's say you do everything that you said and you win. Who loses, and what are they going to do about it? And we hadn't thought about that. So you got to think about, you know, you're disrupting a market, for example. What's the response be? The incumbents are just going to sit there? So what's your plan for thinking it through? That's an example of planning process. These are the kind of questions, again, with Bob Jones tomorrow night, we'll go into pricing and distribution and sales tactics. And another VC expression is, will the dogs eat the dog food? So, all right, it sounds like a great thing. You convinced me it's a great thing, but what evidence do you have that anyone wants it? That's, you know, customers. Will the dogs eat the dog food? Now, the development plan is how do you piece the different components together in order to make something that can work within the time constraint you have as a startup. You don't want nuclear fusion, right? Nuclear fusion we've been working on for 50, 70 years now. And the problem is if you've got a nuclear fusion kind of project, is until it completely works, nothing works. So there's really not a business. Is there a way you can take a portion of it and make it work? I looked at Zipcar early on. Everyone's familiar with Zipcar? Fascinating concept. It's sort of revolutionized a whole bunch of transportation thing. But there were so many moving parts that you had to put together in order to make that work. You know, at a place like MIT where the joke is, if you're recruiting a faculty member, you can have one of three things. You can have tenure, the Nobel Prize, or parking, right? So parking is what everyone picks, right? So here's a company, Zipcar, that's got to figure out how to get parking places. There are a lot of things that were out of their control. And at the end of the day, it may not have been a good investment. I mean, it may have changed things, but I don't think a lot of people made a lot of money in Zipcar. So you want to try to think through, do you have to change the world totally in order to make a dent in the world? Because again, limited time. The action plan. This is part of the, what I like to think of as the identification of credibility testers. As engineers, if you said, I got to build a bridge across the Golden Gate, there's a lot of things you have to do to make that work. Engineering is very much a think everything through kind of thing, and often is very sequential in its process. The credibility testers, a different way of thinking of it is, are there some things that will make this project extremely difficult that if I can show I can solve, I can de-risk the situation? So thinking about a project from how do I convince somebody this is doable is an important part of it. Maybe in the case of the Golden Gate Bridge, it would be securing access rights to an on-ramp, or if you think the issue is a technical issue, doing a sounding to figure out how deep the bedrock was. I was sitting out on a Cape Cod beach one weekend with some house guests, and one guy told me he's working on this project. It was very windy out there, and he said, it's really windy here. I said, yeah, it's always windy here. He said, well, we're working on something involving that. And it turned out he was one of the guys from Cape Wind. And what they were doing was securing access rights to land the cables on it, because if they didn't do that, they couldn't get to the next level. So the first thing is, can you identify credibility testers to reduce the risk? And if you reduce the risk, both for you and for investors, you have a higher probability of success. The other thing is to think about whatever you're doing, about how to sequence that relative to your resources. So the ideal scenario, again, remembering H equals R divided by E, is you want to be able to ideally say, I'm going to do X and actually achieve it, and then you can ask for additional resources to do the next step. If you don't plan that out well and you get stuck between tasks, then you might be able to get away with that once, but if you do it the second time, people are going to say, well, I'm not sure these guys can actually execute. So thinking about, what are the steps I can do versus the resources in order to achieve something that I can say, look, I've added value, so you should give me an opportunity to add even more value. And I always like to try to avoid dependencies on others if I can. That's the big thing. When you deal with a large company as a startup, you're moving fast, and what they think is fast is like an eternity for a startup, because they just have cumbersome processes. So if you can figure out how to avoid dependency on them. We won't cover the lean startup concept in the class here, but I do recommend the book for you to think about, how do you test out concepts with a minimum viable product. It's a valuable read, and it applies beyond sort of the Web 2.0 area. Okay, and then often there's some things you need in a plan, but this doesn't go in the plan, it goes in the appendices. All of these things about resumes, getting a business plan that has the founder with 15 pages of publications and stuff is just overkill, right? Put it in the appendices. If you have any of these other things, don't put it in the main plan, have it available. Okay, so now we'll talk about the business plan as a financing document. And think of this about 3 different levels of reading. The first reading is like a resume. If you make the cut, you get the second reading, which is to figure out if this is going to justify the investment. And the third reading is to say, okay, is this a plan that I as an investor and you as an entrepreneurial team can commit to? And the point is, if you don't make the first cut, you don't get the second 2 cuts. So the question is, what helps people make the first cut? And these are some of the things that occur to people. Here's an idea that's just too good to ignore, right? Just, God, what a brilliant idea. Or a financial promise that's too good to turn down, if you have that. A team that's good enough to believe in. You know, most investors will tell you they'd rather invest in a top team, an A team with a B idea, than an A idea with a B team, because things are going to change. You want to make sure you've got a team that can deliver on it when things happen. An action plan that's credible and focused, details that give assurance of insight, commitment, and follow-through, and actually a format and style that says these guys are serious about achieving what they want to do. Some reasons plans fail to make that first cut. One is just an insignificant market. I've seen plans that say, you know, our market's going to be $100 million, and you look at the financing requirements and they say we're going to need $20 million. Well, that's just too much money for that size market. So that's an example of either they have to redefine the market or figure out how to do it cheaper. Non-credible technology. This is usually not an MIT problem, although the issue can be at MIT that you're much too early along. That is, if it's working on the lab bench, there's a lot of steps until it actually gets into the market. And then a failure to understand the market can be an example. For example, I was reading a plan that clearly required the device it clearly required an FDA approval. I mean, I just couldn't believe that it didn't, and yet they never said anything about it. And the question was, well, they should have addressed that. And if I have to pull it out of them, then it gives you a negative feeling about the team. And then other reasons, the plan's too optimistic or naive, or maybe sometimes not ambitious enough. I have a semiconductor device that's going to be, I'm going to double the speed in 5 years. Well, that's probably not a big enough improvement. So these are all reasons why things may not get the second read. There are cosmetic reasons, and I hate to say it, but it's so aggravating to see a team with really good ideas screw up on the basics, like misspellings, sloppy stuff. You're looking, again, it's like a resume. If you can't get the resume looking professional, why would I even want to talk to you or hire you? So that's the overview of things tonight for the business plan. Why write a plan or have a planning process? What should be in the plan? Again, at a high level, we're going to go into each of the sections over the next 6 days. And then a little bit of thinking about the plan as a financing document. And I'd like to leave you at this point with this triangle that we're going to come back to probably each night just to drill it in of what you're trying to do. At the end, you're trying to come to a very clear idea of what you want to do, what it takes to do it, and have all the support underneath. And it's an iterative process. Some people think this is all linear. I think about this, I test that, it moves on. It's very much like science can be. We try something, it fails, we figure out why it fails, we go back and try it again. But the goal is to find that sweet spot where you can actually make a difference. So with that, we're going to take I'll ask if there are any questions. Again, this is a high level, but if there's some things that need clarification, I'll do the questions now. Otherwise, we'll take a break. We usually say, take 10 or 15 minutes and meet the people next to you, because one of the requirements for the course, if you're doing it for credit, is you got to put together a written requirement, the executive summary or a pitch deck. We want to try to get teams formed to help you if you're somebody with an idea and you need some people to help, vice versa. Given that it's probably a blizzard out there tonight, I think we'll defer that initial meeting until tomorrow night. Take like a 5-minute break or so, and we'll get Steve to get set up, who's going to tell you how to make a pitch. So at the end of the day, after everything you've done, you've got to come and make that pitch, and Steve's going to give you the precursors of that. So we'll come back at about 7:15, give you 8 minutes.